it's just a lot. It's a lot. It's draining, mentally draining. And you know that you could be working better if there's just systems, and find yourself doing these same stupid mistakes, or finding yourself in meetings that you don't need to be, or giving instructions over 2 times, or remaking mistakes. That just didn't have to happen.
I
Like they come with like their really long to-do list, and it's like just never ending, right? And it's like I feel like everybody goes through that phase where they're like, today I am going to stay up late to finish my to-do list. And I am going to check off whatever else possible. And what happens? You either never ever get to the end, or you finish and you got to the end, but you wake up the next morning and there are more things on
think
your
of
to-do list.
more things.
But like think about the groups of what you're organizing. Now, if you want to take this one level further, once you organize it, ask yourself, what is the purpose of me organizing it? But give a different purpose, completely different, like for some other reason. And now organize it differently based on that purpose. And it's going to be the same items, categorized and organized in a different way. And it will improve your thinking skill of categorizations.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
Today on the podcast, I have the pleasure of welcoming St. Rappaport. St. calls herself a brain engineer for ADHD entrepreneurs. She has a background in psychology, art, and design, and currently works with entrepreneurs who aren't growing as quickly as they can due to procrastination and poor organizational skills. If you tend to have 30 open tabs in your browser and a full deck of sticky notes, then this is the episode for you. St., welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am like excited. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, listen, I'm always telling entrepreneurs how they need to niche down in order to get their business to grow, but you seriously niche down. Like, how did you get to start working with ADHD entrepreneurs?
It's been a niching down journey, and I've been like resisting it for so long, but it's honestly been one of the best things I've done on a marketing side. I've actually, when I started doing this work, I've worked with everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean 3-year-olds, and I mean like 60-year-olds, men, women, like everyone in between, all sorts of issues, all sorts of things. But as I did the work, I noticed that I enjoyed older people better. And so I started working just with adults. And then as I continued working with adults, I was like, I enjoy working with entrepreneurs. So I'm going to work with entrepreneurs. And we are slowly niching down. And once I've been working with entrepreneurs for quite a while, I noticed that so many of my clients had ADHD. And while I really don't like the diagnosis of ADHD, the label of ADHD, what it means, the associations with it, I knew that for marketing purposes, it was super important. And so I decided to, yes, market myself as someone for an ADHD-ish business owner. But it's literally just for marketing purposes. So if you are out there listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't want to niche down and like, I don't want to do this, I'm telling you, go for it. It is so worth it. It is so worth it.
Absolutely. It's the gospel. I hope everyone's listening to that. So, how disorganized are the entrepreneurs that you work with when they first come to you? What would a typical day look like for them?
Okay, so typical entrepreneur that works for me has quite a few employees already, um, something around like between 5 to 15 employees, right? So they already have a business, they have some level of success, they have systems, they have something in place if they're having people work for them, but it's obviously not the way they want it to be. There's overwhelm, there's procrastination, there's 100 open tabs, a million of unread messages, always trying to figure out like, who do I need to answer first in order to be able to get this moving? Like, where am I being the bottleneck? Then that person can continue working because they're waiting for this. But at the same time, there's also like meetings that like pop up and like that we need right now, and fires that pop up. And then there's also the deep work that like I need to lock myself into the room and no one's gonna bother me. And there's just everything all over the place. Feeling like you have your hands and feet in every single place at all times. And even if you did give something over to an employee, it's like still thinking about it because like maybe they need me, and maybe I'm gonna figure this out, and what's gonna happen, and what fire is gonna pop up here. Yeah, often it's requiring a lot of coffee to get through the day. Crashing at
All
the end of
day.
the week. Yeah, all day, like 3 to 4 cups of coffee, just for basic functioning, like forget everything else, right? They're starting strong at the beginning of the week and crashing at the end of the week, or some people just start strong every morning and crash every night. But that's a common thing of like starting strong and then crashing, and just not feeling really good because like it's draining, mentally draining, and you know that you could be working better if there's just systems, and find yourself doing these same stupid mistakes or finding yourself in meetings that you don't need to be, or giving instructions over 2 times or remaking mistakes that just didn't have to happen.
I mean, you know, being an entrepreneur, obviously, it is a lot. And it's certainly not for everyone. And there are so many things that are on an entrepreneur's plate at any given time. But it's interesting because I remember a few years ago, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Ivan Meisner, who founded BNI. And I asked him, since he was working with so many entrepreneurs, I said, what are the key success factors to the entrepreneurs you see who really make it big? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, well, funny, I was just discussing that with Richard Branson the other day. I'm like, really? But anyway, he said, I was just discussing that with Richard Branson. And he said, we both agreed that the highly successful entrepreneurs, the ones who really make it, are the ones with the shortest to-do lists. And I thought, wow, that hits home. That hits home, right? Because how many entrepreneurs do you know? And I'm sure you know a lot in your field where, you know, you just have this endless to-do list because it's like you're taking on everyone else's stuff. Like, is that a common situation that you see?
I love that so much. First, can I just say that, especially that it comes from Richard Branson, because people like look at Richard Branson and like all his companies and all his groups and like everything. He's like in every field possible, right? And what does he say? Have the short to-do list. Like, you're not actually there to be doing every one of those little tasks, right? Like, you need to get those off to other people to do, and you need to create the brain space for you to be able to sit there and make decisions, and pass things over, get information, and be able to pass things over. But yes, 100%. Most of the entrepreneurs, like literally, probably everyone, but I don't want to say that without like double checking. Like, they come with like their really long to-do list, and it's like just never ending, right? And it's like, I feel like everybody goes through that phase where they're like, today I am going to stay up late to finish my to-do list, and I am going to check off whatever else possible. And what happens? You either never ever get to the end, or you finish and you got to the end, but you wake up the next morning and there are more things on
Think
your
of
to-do
more things. Exactly. You have
Right?
to add to your to-do list. Exactly. I'm sure so many people are relating
Exactly.
to this right now.
Or like it's coming towards the end and like I need to add on a few more things, right?
Yeah, I've
Like,
got time. I need to fill my time. No, it's
yeah.
so true. And so obviously you have a whole methodology that you take people through, but what's I know that you've studied a lot about the brain, and what is some of the research that you've seen out there about how we can focus more, be more proactive, be more organized? Because I think it's not like we don't want to, but getting there is the challenge. So what is the research told you about how to retrain your brain?
Yeah, I like to look at our brain like a bucket, and we are going through life and we're going through life experiences, and we are filling up our bucket. You know, we take a course, we go through school, we have make these mistakes, and this is adding water into our bucket that is filling up our bucket with knowledge, with what we need to be able to run our business. However, more often than not, in that bucket, there is a hole. And everything that you are trying to implement is going right through that hole. The water is all going out. What is causing that hole? Actually, what's called a foundational thinking skill. We tend to think of thinking as like, oh, right now I'm thinking. But unless you're like sitting down to think and write out your thoughts, like you're not actually thinking. And actually, while you are doing any task, including listening to this podcast, including sending an email to your client or an employee, you are using these thinking skills. These thinking skills are happening in their background. These thinking skills are happening by themselves, but they are helping you to do the task. Now, with 28 thinking skills, there are some that are naturally going to be stronger and some that are just going to be weaker. Those stronger ones make it easy for you to do certain tasks. So anything that you're really good at is because the thinking skills related to it are really strong. Anything that you're not good at that you're procrastinating on, that you're working inefficiently on, that you find yourself making the same mistake 6 times, that you feel really drained by the end of doing that task, that thinking skill is weak. And that thinking skill is creating that hole in the bucket where all that water is coming out.
That's
As
really
soon as
interesting.
you
Let me just get you to pause there for a second, because as you're describing this, what's going through my mind is all of these personality profiles, Myers-Briggs, DISC, et cetera. Is that really an assessment of where our strong thinking skills are, and our weak ones, the things that maybe we don't like to do, we're just not good at? So if I'm less of a detail-oriented person, is that a thinking skill?
Yeah, so what's interesting is those, for the most part, because there are different personality tests, test different things, but most of them, like especially Myers-Briggs and DISC, those cover like categories of big thinking skills. So in order to do like one of the profiles, like in order to do one of the activities that these profiles are assessing, you are using multiple thinking skills. Because every task that we do doesn't require one thinking skill, it requires a few of those thinking skills. So yes, those assessments are assessing how the big categories of your thinking skills that are strong. And that is why after you improve your thinking skills, you will get different results when you retake those assessments.
That's fascinating. So give us some examples of thinking skills.
So have you ever opened up your email after coming back from vacation and there was like 496 emails and you're like, never mind, I'm not answering emails, I'm going to find something else to do.
Well, I did get AI on my inbox, so that has certainly helped. I'm sure my AI is seeing at least that many emails.
Yeah, AI helps us so much. Well, if we use that correctly, right? But what about, do you know anyone who when they walk into a really messy room, they know that they like open the door and it's way too messy, and instead of going in and cleaning it, they just go out and close the door. Like, never mind, I'm not dealing with this,
Avoiding.
right? All this is coming from the same thinking skill called clear perception. Clear perception is how we take in information, and we take information through our 5 senses, and we want it to come in a clear and organized way. Now, most of us can do this on a basic level. If I ask you what your name is, I ask you where you're from, you're listening to this episode, hopefully just like the one piece of information at a time is coming into your brain and it's not getting overwhelming. But what happens when it starts becoming 2, 3, 4, 5, a whole messy room or 600 emails? Then your brain, it's like all this information is shooting in your brain. Can your brain still take it in a clear and organized way?
So this might be when you have 45 tabs open on your browser and you're checking one tab, checking another tab, checking another tab, and you're never really processing because now your brain it kind of freezes. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's one way that it might show up. That might actually be a different thinking skill also, depending on how it's showing up for a person. But whenever there's a lot of information, and instead of you being able to use that information, you either freeze, you get overwhelmed, you just look at the same information 6 times, you read an email, a really long email with 6 paragraphs, and you're like, I'm not sure how to respond to this thing. Whenever there's a lot of information and you feel almost like paralyzed or not able to move forward, that is where this thinking skill of clear perception is making it challenging for you.
So are you saying that that's a thinking skill that some people have as a strength and other people have as a weakness? And then how might that show up depending on whether
Yes,
strong or weak at that thinking skill?
exactly. Some people might have this strong, some people might have this weak, or more than that. Instead of looking at a strong or weak, I like to think of it as on a scale and how strong are you? Because, like we said, you could take in one piece of information, so your clear perception isn't completely zero. Can you take in two? Like then it's right, like on the scale where it is. Now I'll share with you in a second how it might show up when it's strong and weak. But I do want to say that whatever it is, you can improve it. Like wherever you are, you can improve it, and we can get to that also. But someone who has clear perception really strong, they could take in a lot of information at a time. So they might be able to walk into that messy room and right away be able to know, okay, let's do this, pick up the garbage, move the furniture. They go in and they right away go into action because they know what to do. Or if we bring this into business, there's like this new launch that we're doing, or we're having like this new team that we need to like take on and train and hire. And instead of being overwhelmed by this whole project, they're like, okay, I am taking all this information and am I able to organize it and put it in the right place so that way I can use it, versus someone where it's weak will just get overwhelmed, freeze or
Kind of like a triage nurse where like you've got, people coming in and the ER and they're, there's so many things that they have to consider and their brain's probably going a million miles an hour to process and be able to prioritize patients. So it's like triaging business challenges.
Exactly. Exactly. And the cool part is as soon as you improve that thinking skill, then the things that were challenging for you are no longer challenging because at a foundational level, it is fixed.
Interesting. Okay. Give me another example of a thinking skill.
Another example of thinking skill. Sure. Let's take the thinking. So like so many to choose from. I'm like, maybe you want to share something that's like a challenge for you, and we'll like figure out the thinking skill that's related to it. Or it could be either you or something that you know a lot of your clients struggle with.
Okay, so asking for a friend, but I do tend to have many browser tabs open at any given time to try to, that's almost like my to-do list. So if it's something I still need to deal with, I just leave the tab open and then I get to the end of the day and I probably have several tabs open on my browser.
Yeah, and my guess is that it's not just on your browser, but it's in your brain also.
Mm-hmm.
Those tabs are still open, and a bit like when you have too many tabs open, then it starts slowing down the computer, right? And like your website isn't loading as fast. And then like when you open that 79th tab in your brain, then like the same thing happens in your brain. You're not operating at the same level because all those tabs are open, right?
So there's a theory that I've heard where people say like, as you're looking at your emails, for example, that you need to like whatever it is, deal with it right then. Don't put it off. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'm so happy you brought that up because it ties back to your original question of what thinking skill is related to. That is related to the thinking skill, surprisingly, categorizations, like how we categorize and organize things. Now categorizations is a really fun one because like you could categorize big and like talk about food, right? Or you could categorize small and talk about like specific types of chicken wings, like you could like get very, very specific and like and work the same thing. Now, part of this is being able to organize your tasks in a way where it's A, most efficient, but B, also what you're focusing on right now and not having to worry or think about or let the other tasks take up brain space. Okay.
Truly file.
So, yeah, like
Truly
file
file
them.
them. Don't just have them in your face.
Exactly. Now, it doesn't have to be filed all the way in the back storage where you have to walk a mile to go and get it. It can be filed back just like on the back burner or like in like one cabinet over, right? Like we're not open on your desk, but put it in the drawer right next to you, right? And so I'm talking both figuratively and mentally in your brain. You want that information organized. So to answer your question about the email, right? There are times where it makes more sense to like do it immediately. Like it takes 30 seconds. Let's just do it right now. But there are also times like when we just go and do every task immediately, then we're not really working in the most efficient manner because maybe if you wait 5 hours, you'll have to do 5 of this task 5 times. And it just makes sense for you to do them all together once you have all the information from all the 5 people and be able to just do it all at once for all those. Now, it doesn't mean that when you got the information from person number one, that still has to play in your brain. And it doesn't mean that that tab has to be open. You can have it in your brain organized that I am going to get there at the right time. And the tab is closed physically and mentally. So it's not draining energy, it's not draining battery. But that way it is organized in a more efficient way.
Okay. So in the case going back to my tabs, then in theory, would that mean that I take whatever I'm working on and it's one tab and I've got that in front of me and then everything else, maybe I have my other tabs open, but do I just like minimize them so I don't see that whole window until it's time for me to go deal with them? Would that be an example?
There is almost like to call it, like I like to call it almost like a band-aid essentially, because like what's happening is it's like, have you ever put your phone in the other room because you wanted to stay focused, but your mind was still thinking about what was on that phone and that message you were waiting from someone? And so even though physically you put your phone in the other room or physically you minimize the tab, your brain is still thinking about it. And so yes, it may help on some level, but it's going to help until it doesn't. And so what we actually want to do is get you to practice the thinking skill of categorizations, so that way it's stronger, and so that way your brain does it automatically. And that way, whether it's opened or whether it's minimized, your brain is just focused on the tabs that you need for right now.
So how do you do that?
Okay, yeah, sure. So essentially, what we want to do is we want to take items. What I like to do is like literally pull out a drawer or a pantry or something like that anyways needs to get organized. That's papers from your desk or whatever it is. And before you start, ask yourself this question. What is the goal of me organizing it? Like, why do I want to organize this? For example, if someone has a pantry and they have little kids, they may organize their pantry in one way. However, if they have teenagers, they want to organize their pantry a different way. And if they are couple in their 50s, no one's home, like it's just them, there's no one else, their pantry might be organized differently. Now, none of those pantries is the right way for it to be. It is what is best for that situation. And so before you start organizing, you want to ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is the goal of me organizing this? And then look at all your items and create groups, create categories of your items to organize them accordingly. Don't
Okay.
just take it and put it back where it was before, because that's just making an organized mess. But like, think about the groups of what you're organizing. Now, if you want to take this one level further, once you organize it, ask yourself, what is the purpose of me organizing it? But give a different purpose, completely different, like for some other reason. And now organize it differently based on that purpose. And it's going to be the same items, categorized and organized in a different way. And it will improve your thinking skill of categorizations.
So this is just it's a little bit like, doing exercise, going to the gym so you can, I don't know, go do a bike race. So it's a way of just training that skill in your brain. So then you can apply it to business. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Now, while you're doing it, you're creating those neuron connections in your brain. So when it comes to organizing your tasks, when it comes to figuring out what makes most sense to do when, which tabs I could close, etc., those neuron connections will already be stronger.
Interesting. So with these, I think you said there's around 20 or so thinking skills. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then is that the type of, that's basically the exercises that we would need to go through in this process, as to, you have certain exercises that just kind of train the brain, like going to the gym, so that then we can be more efficient and organized in our business. Is that how it works essentially?
That's a big part of it. There's another part that's essentially, it's called, they look at these brain games. They're these pencil and paper like exercises. Essentially, they're dots. And you have to find these shapes within the dots. Now, while you're doing it, it gives me a direct like mirror of your brain. The same way that you approach the dots is the same way you approach your business, the same way you approach your life, your home life, everything. And so while you do those exercises, first of all, I get to watch how your brain is working, so I get to understand your brain. But also you will get stuck and it will be challenging and you'll have to figure it out. And the same way that you figure it out is the same way you are going to figure out your challenges in your business and your life.
Interesting. So that gives you the insight into where some of these thinking skills might be strong versus weak. So you can help to beef up the weak ones, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Very well said.
Okay. All right. And then something else that I remember you talking to me about was having the importance of having a growth versus a fixed mindset. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So Carol Dweck, a psychologist in Stanford University, wanted to know what makes a person successful in like any area, business, academia, sports. Like she researched it all, like what makes a person successful. And they were like, it's not talents, it's not IQ, it's not background, like knocked out everything that they thought it was. And it actually came down to whether you had, like you said, a fixed or a growth mindset. Fixed mindset believes the way you are is the way you'll always be. And a growth mindset is always learning, always growing, asking for feedback, and is looking at mistakes as a growing opportunity versus like, okay, I'm bad, I'll never be able to do this, but rather like, let me learn from this opportunity so I can move forward. If you think about it, anything that you're good at, you got there by making mistakes, by learning from others, by practicing, by trying again, by figuring it right. And you had a growth mindset about it. You figured it out. It wasn't easy, but you figured it out. Anything that you're not good at, well, how much have you tried?
You haven't figured it out yet. Yeah, true. Absolutely.
Exactly.
None of us would be riding a bike if we hadn't fallen out over and skinned our knees several times.
Right? Like, yeah, I love like the baby. Like a baby never ever like gives up, like, okay, like I'm not going to walk anymore. Like they fall and they fall flat on their face and they get hurt and they fall flat on their face and they give up and they don't give up. And then they end up working. We actually all have both a fixed and a growth mindset. So this is what's really important to understand. We have both a fixed and a growth mindset, and we want to catch ourselves falling into a fixed mindset and switch it to a growth mindset so that way we can grow on forward.
So how much of that is related to inner drive?
It's interesting, like conversation about like how much of it is also related to this inner drive of how much of it is like nurture versus nature. And it affects each other, right? So does someone have an inner drive because they were born with an inner drive, or was it because they've been told no so many times and they've been criticized so many times? There's no like real way to be able to figure it out. Like you don't know if it was just genetics
or was that modeled for them, because then that makes
exactly
about, the importance of having a mentor or a coach in business, someone who can kind of help you work through some of the challenges that you have so that you can have more of that growth mindset. They're sort of, when you think the door is closed, they're showing you a way to open it, which can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's why as a leader, when anyone's listening to this, whether it's a leader in business or it's a leader with like your family and friends or whatever it is, you want to promote the growth mindset with the people around you and really encourage them with growth mindset. Quick like tip is don't give them compliments about their outcome, give them compliments about their process. So if let's say a little child made a beautiful picture, instead of saying like, oh, that picture is beautiful, you can say, oh, I see how much patience it took you to draw those lines really straight. Now, what did you just do there?
Yeah. Now you're training them to continue to work that process. You're reinforcing the process and the path to success, which is something that's repeatable. Whereas that one thing that they created may or may not be repeatable.
Exactly. And then like next time they make a picture that's not beautiful, they're going to be like, okay, like I just going to want to give up. But like, no, I could practice drawing the lines really straight again, and I can get better at this.
So language sounds like it's something really important. And there's a big field of research on conscious language. So how much does that play into training our brains?
Massive. Like one of the fastest ways to see whether you have a fixed or growth mindset about something is watch your language. As soon as you say I can't sing, I know you have a fixed mindset about it. I can't do this task, fixed mindset. Simple switches like going from this is hard to this is challenging already is switching it over to that growth mindset. And I always like to add the word yet. So I can't do this yet.
I like that.
True, I can't do it now, right? Like we don't want to lie to ourselves and say like, oh yeah, I could do this. I'm amazing. It's like, I can't do it yet. And automatically that creates your brain, the space in your brain to be able to learn how to figure this out. And I like highly recommend you teach this to the people around you. And you stop each other mid sentence if they are saying a fixed mindset sentence to say it again in a growth mindset way.
Like saying, I can't afford it is something we should all get out of our vocabulary.
Yeah.
Brain is thinking, oh, I guess we can't afford it, as opposed to, and is in your subconsciously, you start taking actions that lead to you not being able to afford something. So, I guess you could either add yet to that or just say, I choose not to spend our money on this right now.
Exactly. They're both great. They're both great sentences, right? Like it's not like there's the perfect way to change it to a mindset.
Yeah, that's interesting. So tell me a little bit more about the process that you take entrepreneurs through. We've sort of touched on a little bit with this, the thinking skills, but so you've got this massively disorganized entrepreneur who's probably most of us who comes to you and is, they're just not achieving the goals that they want for their business. Where do you start?
Okay, first thing is I want to understand where their thinking skills are currently standing. So what we do is I meet with them one-on-one to just understand their challenges, go through the 28 thinking skills and get a basic understanding of where they're of where each of those thinking skills are and create a roadmap of what we're going to work on first. After that, we work for 90 days together in groups of 6, where we do these brain exercises that I told you earlier about, those dot pages that allow you to work on your brain. Mail you all your supplies, so you have like everything, pencils, papers. Like, I don't want you to have to print one paper, find an eraser, like you have everything. And during these 90 days, we do these brain exercises. Now, what's super fun about this, we're in a really small group, so everyone becomes friends with one another, one learns from one another, and we have these like really interesting discussions. But we also actually break out into breakout rooms where you're in a breakout room by yourself, and I come to give you one-on-one attention. So even though you're in a group setting, you also get one-on-one attention in every session. That way you get like both the group, the learning from another, understanding how other people's brains are working, etc., and also specifically what you need based on the roadmap that we've created in the beginning.
And is everyone in the group, do they all have similar like gaps in the same thinking skills, or is it more of a variety?
There are certain things that I tend to find is really common, like tons of entrepreneurs struggle like with these same type of things. So there's always overlap in certain ways, but I actually purposely like to put people in different groups because we end up learning more from one another in different ways. Conversations become different. We get to have different thought processes. So I get a nice mix.
Okay. And then when you go through the 90 days, now what does the entrepreneur's day look like?
First things first, there's like this like inner peace and like calmness because like internally you're organized, right? Remember, we're not just putting your phone in the other room. We're not just like giving you follow this like sort of plan or template or to-do list. It's like your brain is actually organized. Your brain is able to function better. There's more space in your brain for you to be able to do what you want to do. Going back to like what we spoke about earlier about like having that short to-do list, like you have that space to be able to make those good decisions and to be a good entrepreneur and CEO. But most definitely on a very physical level, there's way less like sticky notes, way less cups of coffee being drunk, less tabs are closed, less to-do lists are way shorter, and any task that you tend to have done before, so whether that is planning, making a decision, running team meetings, communicating something over to someone, all tend to happen faster and more efficiently.
So
it's not
a lot of the processes out there, they sound like they're more tips and tricks, like, organize your to-do list this way, have a different tool. But what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that until we actually retrain our brains to think differently, to really capitalize on these thinking skills, that whatever process or methodology that we try just isn't going to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's cool, remember like that bucket that we spoke about in the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
When you improve those thinking skills and you close that bucket, so all those other processes that you've tried in the past will now work.
Interesting. And 90 days. So why 90 days?
90 days is enough time for you to like get into understanding, develop your growth mindset. We all have a growth mindset, like we said, but like really catch yourself from falling into fixed mindset. Really be able to work on these thinking skills in a way where it becomes natural. That's our goal. So in the beginning, while you're working on it, like you think about it and it's like playing on your mind and you have to be like conscious about it. But after a couple of times and like all of a sudden you don't think about it and you find yourself doing clear perception, doing categorizations, doing these things naturally, just like breathing oxygen, like you don't think about it.
Yeah.
And we also have this other part called self-mediation, which we could get into or not, but that like also creates the space to really help you get unstuck and be able to figure out any situation. 90 days just like is the perfect time to make that happen.
Make a change and to focus and get really serious, and not so much that it seems overwhelming to people to get into it either. And I think about the value of something like this. It's not just organizing your day, but it's about focus. Like one of the things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially startup founders, struggle with is just chasing after the next shiny object. And I think of that movie Up with the cute dog where, every minute he's like squirrel and he's looking at something else. And I use that as an analogy with a lot of founders who are, like you can pivot yourself to success or you can pivot yourself to failure. And sometimes they just get so excited by the next thing that they can't just build and launch the first, MVP of what they have. So it sounds like, skills like this, if you have these in your toolkit, that it can help you with focus. Am I right?
100%. Yeah. First of all, you literally have more time, but like a bit like those tabs, they're closed. So now when you have just one tab to focus on, you show up and you're able to do the task with full bandwidth, with full focus, and mental clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I blame people laugh, I'm dating myself here, but I blame Microsoft Windows, because up until then, we actually could only work on one thing at a time on our computer. And then suddenly we have Windows and we have, multiple things that we can work on at the same time. And I think, am I right that the brain actually cannot multitask, that we task switch and we lose, I can't even remember what the statistics are, but we lose a crazy amount of time, even every time we stop doing one thing and then move to the next thing and then, go back, that we've lost so much efficiency. So I'm sure, we get to the end of our day and it's like, well, what the heck did I get done today? So that focus is something that could really, really make a difference for a lot of entrepreneurs.
100%. Very well said.
Excellent. Well, listen, this has been a really, really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of it. If they would like to reach out to you directly, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, they could take the thinking skill assessment to see where each one of their thinking skills are standing at lifepicksuniversity.com/brain. So it's lifepicks, university.com/brain. And if you want to reach out to me directly, then you can reach out to me at hello@lifepicksuniversity.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.